Living along the Pacific coastline, first in Yokohama and now in Vancouver, allowed me to develop a very unique relationship with the waters. I remember every year I would count down the days until I could spend every day exploring this beach town, allowing the current to drift the summer days away until the skies resembled blank canvases rather than a work of art we called the sunrise, until the leaves lost their color. I spent the longest days of the year floating above the waters, but at the same time, I spent what felt like the longest days of the year trapped underwater. What does drowning feel like? When the undertow hits and your lungs are filled with water, burning. For me, it wasn't the water that pulled me down to my lowest point. I was once in a very dark place, but nobody knew at the time, not even my closest friends, because I didn't let them. I began to submerge in all the expectations. But from the outside, it looked like as if I had my life together. I had my days planned, I always had my journal by my side, and I kept myself busy. From the outside, you would never have been able to tell that it was all just a facade. I used to play hide and seek almost every day, as if it were a game. Well, mostly the hide part. I'd hide behind my outgoing and bubbly persona. I'd hide behind the everyday struggle as an elite student athlete. I'd fill my schedule up so I wouldn't have to face all the pressure, because when you're busy, you don't even have time to be stressed, right? I set a timer for 10 minutes when I needed to cry because I simply didn't have the time. There were always more tasks on the to-do list. I didn't even have the time to acknowledge the fact that a few years ago, my mental health capsized. You see, I was always the friend they went to for help, advice, and support. And I was happy to be there for them. But when it came to myself, I didn't want to burden anybody with my own troubles, so I pushed these feelings away. Bottling it all up, I began to drift away from morals and common sense. I made impulsive decisions like stealing my parents' car and sneaking out countless times. But no matter how many times my parents got angry at me for doing something like that, I plugged my ears and brushed it away. From a young age, I was labeled gifted, and I felt the pressure to live up to these expectations. At first, I just did whatever I enjoyed, dipping my toes into the waters. Hockey, piano, lacrosse, rugby, you name it, I loved them all. But at a certain point, I became conditioned to think that if I wasn't the best at everything, I was a failure. So I'd challenge myself to the point where I would be at war with myself. I have clear memories of myself when I was in grade 4, crying asleep because I felt like a failure at 10 years old. This later developed into a series of eating disorders and sleepless nights. At this point, my feet couldn't touch the sand anymore, and my head started to plunge under the familiar waters. I tried to tread water, to tough it out, but you could only tread for so long. I didn't see the problem because in my household, and actually I find this with a lot of immigrant households, mental health is not a common subject. I finally realized the extent of this neglect, actually last year on my 16th birthday, when I went down to the office to look for a janitor after I accidentally spilled some water during a lockdown drill. Beside me was an Asian boy and his mother trying to sign out, but they weren't allowed to leave. I mind my own business until all of a sudden he starts getting hostile, and the police have to come to settle the situation. With tears running down his face, I stood in the office looking out at him, listening to the sirens approach the school. His mother, clearly distressed, starts apologizing for her son's behavior, but what she doesn't acknowledge is the pain in his eyes. I could see it, and I didn't even know his name. I wanted to ask him why, and I'd be lying to you if I told you I just went about my day after. I later realized that I too was lashing out for no reason. I had negativity surrounding me, latching onto me, but I couldn't put an actual reason to it. In order for me to step away from that and gain control, I was constantly putting myself in situations where it gave me enough adrenaline to forget about the stress for a moment. But at the end of the day, the root of the problem never went away. it planted itself deeper. Let me introduce to you a part of me that's giving me something to look forward to on my darkest days, but at the same time has been the reason I broke down on my sunniest days. I'm a hockey player, and I played on a team full of outstanding players, but it took me a lot to get there. I got my first pair of rollerblades when I was 6 after I moved to Canada. Soon after, my parents threw me onto the ice, and I fell in awe with the feeling of flying. I was a talented skater, but the stick part didn't come naturally to me. Regardless, all I knew was that I loved hockey and that I had potential. When I switched over from boys hockey to girls hockey, I was so over the moon to play at a more competitive level because I made the rep team. I even quit figure skating that year too, so that's how you really knew I was all in. I was diving into the deep end. About a week in, coming from boys hockey with a background in figure skating, although I knew that I was good enough or I wouldn't have been there in the first place, my coach at the time neglected me right off the get-go. Couldn't understand why, so I let it get to me, and it was pretty hard to navigate for a 12-year-old. At the time, I was too scared to do anything about it and speak up because I didn't dare to disagree with any of the coaching decisions that were made. My parents also had no influence, unlike some of the other girls' parents, because mine knew nothing about hockey. But rather than allowing me to quit when the waters got choppy, they encouraged me to persevere. Then, all I had to fend for myself, was myself. Although I knew that I was deliberately being mistreated, I still showed up to every single practice because I didn't want to give him a real reason to bench me. I gave it another year after that, but I began to believe that I wasn't good enough to continue. I even planned to quit hockey, but something told me to give it one last shot. So I decided to try out for this team called the Fraser Valley Rush, which is part of the Major Midget AAA League. To put into perspective, it is the highest level you can play before pursuing post-secondary. The coach of this team, Delaney Collins, was a former Team Canada player, gold medalist, and coach of Team BC. So I thought, wow, how cool would it be to be coached by her? Well, like I said, this team was full of superstars, and there was a lot of competition. With my confidence plummeting by the minute, what made me think I had a shot? Well, the way it worked in my head was, make this team or quit. There were 2 tryouts, one in May and one in August. Long story short, May comes around and I don't get a spot. But by then, I didn't care about anything. I didn't care about hockey. I didn't care about school, rugby, lacrosse, work, anything. I showed up to the second tryout expecting nothing. At the end of the weekend, I went to say thank you to Delaney after a great tryout, and she ended up offering me a spot mid-conversation. Among the most seasoned players, she chose me, and from that day forward, she gave me more chances than I could have ever asked for. Little by little, she started to develop me into twice the player I used to be, starting with a mentality. She sprinkled some confidence in me and taught me more than just how to be a hockey player. She doesn't know the impact she had on me by being such a remarkable role model, but I give her credit for getting me to where I am today. I had a conversation with her at the end of the year about what to do about my upcoming year, which was my grade 11 year. My school offers this program called the IB program, which is a very rigorous academic program, and I was kind of caught up between wanting to take this challenge and trying to stick with hockey at the same time. My counselors at the time, my school counselors, suggested that playing elite level hockey while pursuing full IB would be a combination for disaster. But Delaney disagreed. She said she believes in me, and in order to be great, you have to take these challenges. If it weren't for that little nudge, I wouldn't have had the courage to do so myself. She's one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about coaching, mentorship, and giving back. Why I always try to check in with a friend. Because I think the only way we can collectively achieve great things is to uplift those around us. Now that I look back, I gained more than I lost. Not only did this team give me 19 other girls that I can count on any day of the year, 19 other girls that I call family. This team gave me more chances and opportunities I could have ever asked for, that I'm beyond grateful for. Another one of my best friends wrote me a letter once that said, "Make it count, but do not negotiate with your mental health and well-being. While I stand in awe of your work ethic, I sometimes encourage you to take a step back and let yourself relax. And if you need a friend, I'm one text away." And that stuck with me. Well, underneath all the walls and labels, we're all just trying to become a better version of ourselves. You won't be able to tell, and they won't show it either, because of the fear of vulnerability. But I hope that by me being vulnerable today, it can spark some conversations. Amidst all the blur, all you need is an individual who sees the struggle and gives a little push, a steer in the right direction. It's powerful, and the impact it had on me, I carry with me every day. Imagine if we could all be this person for someone else. It's so simple, yet we rarely take that extra effort to do so. Learning how to swim is not easy and does not come naturally. Even if it feels like you've dropped 1,000 meters below the surface, you will rise again. The feeling of floating is rewarding and refreshing, but you will never experience that in the shallow waters. You can stand in the sand all you want. However, life's thrills appear where you can't reach the ocean floor. So you decide, sink or swim.